Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of Cambodia. Cambodia is located in Southeast Asia and it borders Thailand up here. It borders Laos right here, and it has this long border with Vietnam. So the main geographic feature of Cambodia would be the Mekong River, which is a very important river in this corner of the world. In Cambodia, it flows down here, comes through this busy city center, it flows out back into Vietnam there. So you can see that there's a lot of little towns and things along the river, including the capital city of Phnom Penh right there. The Tonle Sap River flows this way out of the Mekong into the Tonle Sap Lake. And the lake looks a little different on this map than a normal lake would, and that's because this lake changes its size. It becomes massive during the monsoon season and shrinks down during the dry season. So it doesn't really have specific borders like a regular lake would. It grows and shrinks. Right by the Tonle Sap Lake is one of the most famous sites in the world, and that's Angkor Wat, which is the largest religious structure in the world. You can see it's right here. It's not on the map, but the city of Siem Reap is right here, which is where like the tourists go to see Angkor Wat. And of course there'll be pictures in this book. After history, you'll flip through this and I'll show you some pictures of Angkor Wat. There's one down here, but it's kind of, my book's kind of in a precarious place. There it is. So I can't really show you this picture, but we'll see other pictures of Angkor Wat. And let's see. For the most part, Cambodia is fairly flat. That's why you can see lots of rivers and things coming through. It also explains how the lake can grow so much. There are a few mountainy areas of Cambodia. Right here are the Cardamom Mountains, and up here are the Dangrek Mountains. But for the most part, especially as you can see down here, it's a very flat region where the river flows. Cambodia also borders the Gulf of Thailand here. Right here is the, Kampong Son Bay. And there's about 60 or so islands out here, very small. Some are inhabited, some just have really pretty shrines on them, things like that. Some have little fishing villages, but they're pretty tiny for the most part. And pretty much that's it for geography of Cambodia. It is a small country, as you can see here, and yeah, for the most part it's just a flat, marshy geography, perfect for growing rice, which we're gonna seg into history with that. The earliest evidence of humans is from around 6000 BCE, but it's believed that people have been in this area for way longer than that. And rice farming would have started sometime around the 3rd millennium BCE. It's a very ancient, like, food source, I suppose. Farming technique here in Cambodia. It's something they've been doing for so long and will continue to do. The Iron Age would have begun around 500 BCE, a little later than other parts of the world. And eventually, the first major kingdom to spring up in this area was known as the Funan. And Funan rose to prominence during the 1st century CE. And they had a lot of trade with China and India, and therefore brought Buddhism and Hinduism to the country. And both religions were very welcomed, and some took to one, some took to the other, and some mushed them together along with some like other animist beliefs and things like that. It's very interesting. Later, the kingdom of Funan became known as Chenla, as it split into land Chenla and water Chenla, with this being Water Chenla down here in what's now Vietnam. It was way bigger than the borders of Cambodia today. But Water Chenla eventually got taken over by Java, which is just down there. And that was a very powerful trading empire at the time. So they started conquering. And the king of Chenla at the time, his name was Jayavarman II. He declared independence from Java, and in 802 CE he founded what's known as the Khmer Empire. Now, quick side note, little disclaimer, because Cambodia is one of those places where there are words and phrases like Khmer that are pronounced very differently than they're pronounced in English. For one thing, Cambodia is Kampuchea in Cambodia. And that's because this is the English version of the French version of Kampuchea, which has happened to quite a few countries. I know Japan comes to mind because Japan's known as Nippon, and we get Japan from the English version of, I think, the Italian version of the Chinese version of Nippon. So it gets a little mixed up in translation. So Khmer is really pronounced Khmer. I make a note of that. That's how you say it in the Khmer language. But in English, we say Khmer, and that's just because that's how it is in the English language, kind of like the capital of France in English is Paris, and in French it's Paris, right? You know, no one here in America is going to say Paris, they'll say Paris, so kind of like that. So I'm going to stick with Khmer because I'm American, and I'm going to stick with American pronunciations, but know that for the most part it's pronounced Khmer. Anyway, the Khmer Empire is incredibly powerful. They build all the infrastructure, all the schools and roads and all of the successful things you can imagine in a large trading empire. The king became a god king, very much worshipped. And during I think the 11th century, Theravada Buddhism was reintroduced to the area, which really took off and displaced Hinduism and the other form of Buddhism, which is Mahayana Buddhism. Don't have time to get into the differences today. Just know that Theravada is more of like the like monks in the orange robes praying and being meditative, basically. Not so much the like Buddha statues and things like that. But the cultures from those religions kind of hung around and meshed with the current version of Buddhism to create the beautiful architecture of the Khmer Empire, which Angkor Wat is the best preserved example of. It's a stunning, stunning building. And they were at their grand heights for quite a while until, they even had a Mongol invasion. Kublai Khan came by in the 1200s, but they were paid off because the Mongols, they weren't really about destroying everything. They were just about money. They just wanted to take over places. So if you paid them, they would leave. So Khmer was able to pay the Mongols to get them to leave. But in 1432, the Ayutthaya kingdom from what's now Thailand came in and invaded and sacked the capital of Angkor. And essentially what's now Cambodia, or what was the Khmer Empire, kind of came under the thumb of both what was Siam, now Thailand, and Vietnam, two very powerful like countries in a way, right in between. So they really kind of fought for this territory. It shrank. It became more of a vassal state over time. There was a war from 1841 to 1845, the Siamese-Vietnamese War, which was basically to figure out what to do with this land, who should claim it. And it was eventually decided to be like a joint rule, kind of a split thing. So, it was quite a mess. They were being pretty bullied, and there were also rebel groups fighting back against the two nations as well. So don't think that they were just getting picked on for no reason. There were people fighting back, but still. Anyway, that's old news. The king at the time, Cambodia, King Norodom, reached out to the French in 1863 because France was the major European power in this corner of Asia. And France decided to make it a protectorate. So in 1867, they adopted Cambodia and made it part of French Indochina, which would essentially be Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia meshed into one. And France came in and built all the infrastructure, right? They built the roads and the schools and the hospitals and all of the modern necessities that a country would need. And they also got to pick the king, like who would be the next king to rule. So they had quite a hold on the political and, in a way, everyday life in Cambodia, which came to a screeching halt in 1941 during World War II, and the Japanese invaded and occupied until 1945. Cambodians at this point were kind of like, we don't want the French to come back, you know, we don't want a repeat of that. We want to be our own thing. And, you know, there were some splinter groups, some independence groups, some communist groups, which we're going to get back to. And eventually France agreed, and on November 9th, 1953, Cambodia became independent. And King Norodom Sihanouk was the monarch at the time. He was ruling before he became the official. It was the Kingdom of Kampuchea at this time. And he was very heavily involved in the new politics of the country, to the point where at one point he abdicated so that he could run for prime minister. But he would eventually return as king. Anyway, next door over in Vietnam, there's a crisis happening, in that it's something I get into more in my Vietnam episode, but essentially it's what's known in America as the Vietnam War, where we have the northern communists fighting against the southern, I suppose, capitalists, supported by the United States, the north being supported by the Soviets and China. So Cambodia is right here in the middle. Cambodia decides to declare neutrality, and by declaring neutrality, that means that they allow North Vietnamese soldiers and South Vietnamese soldiers to have sanctuaries in the country and have supply routes through Cambodia into their territories, which the United States does not appreciate, because they are fighting and losing against the North Vietnamese troops. So apparently it's kind of a scandalous how it came to be, but we're not going to get into that today. But it wound up with the United States starting to bomb Cambodia, bombing those sanctuaries where the northern Vietnamese soldiers were hiding, which Cambodia didn't appreciate. So the United States amped up their bombings, which led to a bit of political crisis in the country. The king was overthrown in a coup in 1970. A general named Lan Na took over. It's believed he was helped out by the United States because he was very anti-communist and, you know, very opposed to the northern Vietnamese cause, I suppose, which the United States were also. This sparked a civil war with the current government against not just the king, but also the communists in Cambodia, which their big group was known as the Khmer Rouge, with their leader being Pol Pot, which isn't his real name. That's kind of like his nickname, I guess. I don't know. His name. But that eventually wound up with the Khmer Rouge overwhelming the country and taking over Phnom Penh in April 1975, overthrowing that government and establishing their own reign of terror. So the Khmer Rouge, they were like extreme communists, and you know, there's like extreme communism, but they would take it to a whole other level. They had a year zero policy where they would undo anything modern and especially anything Western. They evacuated everyone out of the major cities, sent them into villages so that they could work on collective rice farms. They got rid of, like I said, anything Western, so telephones, medicine, anything like that. Religion was made illegal, so many religious leaders and monks were very heavily persecuted. It was just a very bad time, and if anyone tried to resist or fight back, they were tortured and killed. And there were millions of Cambodians who lost their lives during this time in what is a genocide by definition. It was a horrible, horrible time, but it came to a very swift end because some Khmer Rouge troops were attacking some places on the Vietnamese border. Vietnam retaliated by invading and taking over and kicking out the current government and occupying the country, which essentially saved the country in a way. Vietnam occupied Cambodia until 1992, until a new government could be installed. King Norodom Sihanouk was reinstated in 1993, and essentially, trying to make things go back to normal. It's kind of hard when the cities were all evacuated. So most of these, little towns you see, I call them towns because they're very sparsely populated. They haven't really recovered from this time period. So there are some very large towns along the coast, but they're very spread out. It's kind of hard to describe. It's a very rural country, very underdeveloped now because of that very horrible period in its history. But democracy was set up. There was a big election in the early 90s, and the two political parties were split. They got pretty much equal votes, so they decided just to have two prime ministers, which that never works ever, to have two heads of state. So eventually, one of the prime ministers, Hun Sen, essentially staged a coup, threw out that other prime minister, and became the sole prime minister. And he's basically considered a dictator. He's extremely corrupt. Massive protests have been held against him. He's one of those leaders that just seems to magically win every election, even though he's incredibly unpopular. He's one of those, but there's still the king that is, I believe he's the head of the military, whereas Hun Sen, the prime minister, is the head of the government. I think that's how it works in Cambodia, if I remember correctly. And also, war crimes trials have been slowly rolling out thanks to the UN and other groups in Cambodia, including a Khmer Rouge splinter group actually is the one that captured Pol Pot. He died of a heart attack under house arrest. He didn't actually get to face the music of what he did, but in 2010 those trials started to come out. Many people are being sentenced to life in prison, convicted of crimes against humanity, things like that. So slowly recovering. There are a lot of places, particularly in the capital, that are being heavily invested upon, I suppose, by China and Japan. The majority of tourists to Angkor Wat are Chinese and Japanese and various other Asian countries. So it's slowly rebuilding. It's coming up, but it doesn't really help that there's a corrupt government behind everything. So we'll have to see what happens in Cambodia's history. So let's flip through the book and see some beautiful pictures of Cambodia. First of all, look at this picture of this beautiful person in some very wonderful traditional clothes. And I like this front picture too. Well, this too. This is a pretty cool roof. My pencil almost rolled off the desk very loudly. Let me move it over there. This picture of a close-up of a dancer's feet, because the dances, the traditional dances in Cambodia are so precise and so interesting and unlike any other culture, really. Let's see what we've got. Some sweet faces there. Let me slide all this over. There we go. I really don't want any loud noises rolling off the desk. Karaoke is apparently huge in Cambodia, which totally get that. Karaoke is awesome. So here on this map, you can see lots of the little towns around, and you can see the river and the lake there as well. We've got someone, she's walking on the old railroad tracks there, and some more smiling faces. Cambodia has a huge young population due to the genocide. So there's definitely way more young people than older people. It's a really pretty picture too, out on the Gulf of Thailand. We've got some old stonework there up in the mountains. And a physical map, so you can see more of just how flat the majority of the country is, with a couple of mountains. That's the highest point. It's Phnom Arwal. There we go. Phnom Arwal. The beautiful, beautiful jungle here. The clouds and gorgeous waterfalls as well. Some of the major cities. Let's see. So this down here. Gotta read this to see. Oh, so this is Sihanoukville. And up here, this must be Battambang. Yeah, because Battambang has a lot of very French-looking houses like that from its colonial days. This is on one of the islands. Isn't that pretty? Oh, isn't that gorgeous on the Mekong River? That's a pretty picture. And some big swampy mangroves, very characteristic of this part of the world. Oh, look at this. We've got a cow on the beach. That's adorable. And some monsoon floods as well, not so adorable. Oh, gorgeous bamboo forest, all cloudy, mysterious. Some bats, or flying foxes they're called. Look at this, the mouse deer, the smallest known mammal in the world that has hooves. This guy over here is the Khmer, which is believed to be extinct. They haven't been seen for many, many years. This book says the last one seen in the wild was 1988. But they're the national animal, and we don't know. There may very well be Khmers out there. It's kind of hard to find them, I guess. Some beautiful, beautiful peacocks there. And some cormorants and fishing, diving birds. Oh, snake warning. I am so sorry if you're sensitive to snakes. There's a big old king cobra coming up, so caution. Here comes. He's ready to strike. Ooh, big and tough. Snake is... Wait, did I even get it in frame? There we go. Big. And a water monitor. A big old lizard. Okay. Alright, you can look now if you looked away, because there's a very sweet toad here. This is the oral horned toad. It looks like a leaf. Some of the beautiful forests here, which when I think of like Southeast Asian forests, this is what I think of, like the trees with the big palm trees sticking up like that. Some beautiful work here on, oh, this is on Angkor Thom, near Siem Reap, another one of the few temples, because the Khmer Rouge destroyed nearly all the ancient temples. It's very sad. An old artifact being uncovered. Looks like a little pot. This is built during the Funan period. It says the Phnom Da Temple. There's a map of Funan right here, and you can see how they traded to India, to China. Look at this. This is a Garuda, I think it's pronounced. Half bird, half human. One of the mythical creatures of Cambodia. Here's how far the Khmer Empire spread. It was pretty huge, very powerful. There's Angkor, the capital. And here is Angkor Wat. Let's check it out. It is like so stunning. I really wanted to get a book from my library so that I could do a whole video about Angkor Wat, but I couldn't find anything good, so maybe another day. This is Jayavarman the 7th, and he looks like a very peaceful kind of Buddha figure there, doesn't he? These are some French explorers rediscovering Angkor Wat, because after the collapse of the Khmer Empire, the jungle swallowed up all of their old buildings and temples, so a lot of them had to get rediscovered. Some rubber being produced, one of the major exports there. They got all those rubber trees. Here's Norodom Sihanouk. This is apparently some North Vietnamese on one of their trails through Cambodia to get to a base camp in Vietnam. And a map of Vietnam War, Cambodia. So let's see, you can see all the times the United States moved in. The Ho Chi Minh Trail would be the southern Vietnamese trails, and then the, right? No, that's the northern Vietnamese trails. Hello, Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the Sihanouk Trail would go from Sihanoukville here up into these territories. Some airplanes bombing. And this is from the Genocide Museum. Some of the skulls recovered from the killing fields, Cambodia. Some refugees. Let's see. This is in 1980 or the 1980s, due to the Vietnamese invasion and all of that chaos. This guy, he's known as Akira, and apparently he's very gifted at finding landmines. So there are still many landmines scattered throughout Cambodia, and obviously it brings about all the troubles that old landmines do. So very thankful to people like this guy. Isn't this pretty? This is the Parliament building. Beautiful. And here is the flag. Where did my pencil go? It's over here. So we can read about the Cambodian flag, which, as you can see, Angkor Wat is front and center. It says, the Cambodian flag is distinctive. It is the only national flag that depicts a monument on it. The flag has blue horizontal bands on the top and bottom, separated by a red band in the center. On the red band is a white image depicting temple towers of Angkor Wat. The blue symbolizes the nation's royalty, the red represents the rest of the nation and its people, and the white stands for the purity of religion. The tower structure symbolizes more than just a connection to the great Angkor civilization. It is also said to symbolize the structure of the universe as a whole. The earliest known Cambodian flag from the mid-1800s had a design similar to the one used today. The current flag was adopted in 1948 and was used until 1970. Through the civil strife of the 1970s and 1980s, a variety of flags were used. Then in 1993, the 1948 flag was once again adopted. Sorry if you can hear my tummy. I had a really early dinner, so my tummy wants some more food. This is the current king, Norodom Sihamoni, and here is Hun Sen, the current prime minister. Casting a vote there. And this is one of the founders of one of the opposition parties in Cambodia, speaking out at a political rally here. And these people are watching a war crimes trial. Kind of looks like Pol Pot right there, but anyway. A big parade here. It's quite a festival happening over there. The many provinces of Cambodia. And here's some pictures of Phnom Penh. So as you can see, the industry is starting to boom. We've got some very distinctive skyscrapers in the capital now. So, you know, it's becoming its very big industrious thing, along with some very ancient buildings here. Let's see if I can see what this is. If it says on here. I feel like it does. Oh well. I don't want to read this whole thing. Ooh, he's got some donut holes. Yummy. I would take one. Some fresh vegetables for sale. Here's their currency, the riel, down here. And planting some rice in the rice paddies. A resources map, so you can see just how much is just plain forest out there, but there is some mining and some farming and some fishing. Here's a rubber tree being tapped for latex. Here's a garment factory, which, you know, a lot of clothes here in the U.S. are made in Cambodia. I feel like whenever I go to Old Navy, I get Cambodian-made clothes there. But anyway, this other big industry. This road got wrecked during the rains, it looks like, and they've got to dig the cars out and carefully ride their motorbikes, getting a health checkup there. This is a tuk-tuk, a kind of little motorized way to get around the city. Now, I like this picture a lot. So this is apparently a schoolhouse, and these kids are outside playing, having fun under their school, because a lot of buildings are built on stilts just for reasons like this, because it'll flood and will keep the building safe if it's up high on the stilts. So they get to have swim time. This dude's doing a cannonball in the corner. Have some fun swim time, which, man, if I had that as a kid, I would have loved that. I was obsessed with swimming as a kid. These are the Krung people, one of the many indigenous Khmer groups, which there's quite a few. You can see the majority of the country is ethnically Khmer, with many other small groups around there. And a population map, you can see just how many people live in this valley is compared to the rest of the country. And she's paddling on the Tonle Sap Lake. Oh, she's doing some homework. And working hard in school. And, oh, they're at a career fair, it says. That's awesome. Here's an example of some Cambodian writing, and this is from Angkor Wat. Very beautiful script. In comparison to English, please don't feed the sweet sun bears. You know how much I love sun bears. They're so fun. Oh, wow. So this is a statue in Angkor Wat, which really goes to show that combination I was talking about of Buddhism and Hinduism mushed together, because this is definitely a Buddha statue, but look how many arms he has. Very much like a Hindu statue with some very Hindu-looking clothes on him. Isn't that so interesting? There's a very peaceful Buddha statue and some Buddhist monks there. And we have some Muslims worshiping in their mosques and some Christians worshiping in their church. Looks like a Catholic church based on that statue. And shamanism is still a thing that happens in some rural parts of the country. Here's some pictures from some holidays. This is for Buddha's birthday. They're lighting so much incense. Wow, that must be an overwhelming smell. And this is for their day of remembering their ancestors. Ooh, learning some traditional dance there. Like I said, very precise movements. Ooh, this is a Naga, like an ancient Cambodian dragon, which the Khmer people are descended from. Look at this. Beautiful artwork. That's from a temple, it says. It's a little tapestry. Shadow puppetry is a big art form. And this is from the Museum of Cambodia, some ancient artifacts there. This guy's playing some little gongs here. And I love this picture because you can see the traditional dance and the theater style. It's so intricate, right? And you know, just this picture alone tells you the story. You know exactly what's happening in this image. It's so neat. We're creating some silk textile here very delicately, and creating some very intricate pottery as well. And another great example of some dance with a really cool mask on. This style of art was by Nick Dim, who became really popular. See, I knew my pencil was going to fall. Really popular in Europe for this kind of advertising art style, but he was killed by the Khmer Rouge. Kites are a big thing in Cambodia. They have a big kite festival. This guy is named Hem Bunting. He's a famous Olympic runner. Football, of course, is a huge sport, as it is all over the world. And there are lots of really interesting wrestling forms in Cambodia. This one is called Bokatole. And some other Cambodian style wrestling here. This game's actually not soccer or football. This is called Chin Lone, which is kind of like a hacky sack game. You keep the ball up off the ground using your feet, using whatever you can, basically. Don't let it touch the ground. I like this picture too, not just that it's more people enjoying some swimming, but this is in the moat in Angkor Wat, and they're just having a ball. They're, you know, not even caring that they're in one of the most famous spots in the world. They're just out for a swim. It's probably a hot day, the water's nice, out for a swim. Doing some old-timey fishing there. These kids here are playing the Cambodian version of jacks. And we've got some really, this is breakfast. I would love to have this for breakfast. That looks so good. Got a bunch of fish here, ready to sell, it looks like. We've got some bananas and coconut milk, which is precisely what it says, bananas and coconut milk. Lots of various fruits that you can really only find in Southeast Asia, like jackfruit, things like that. So this is a very traditional Cambodian headscarf called a krama. Riding on the bicycle, it's funny. This is on the boat or the water festival day where they have big boat races. And a very beautiful thank you. Or hello, or I'm sorry, it says, but yeah. Everyone's out on the motorbike today, enjoying the day. And this looks like a wedding. Isn't that beautiful? And at a shrine remembering our ancestors. And that's the end of the book. Yep. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have a whispered video about Cambodia for you tomorrow. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Thank you again and have a very good, oh, I forgot to say, I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good night.